Hey friends, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com. I'm finally back on my tarot parlor. In fact, I've only been home for about 20 minutes, so I'm sure I look like a hot mess. It's a pretty long trip between where I live and Niagara Falls, where we watched the eclipse, or where we experienced the eclipse. So, but this morning in our hotel room, I woke up almost frantic that I wanted to do a video on the case centering on young Sebastian Rogers. No, I don't know why. I just woke up feeling like it was extremely important. And he's been on my mind. He obviously was on my mind this morning when I woke up. I wasn't able to do a video at the hotel because we had to leave and we had a time crunch. And of course, when you're sitting in a car, we did the trip in two stages. We left Niagara Falls and stayed in a hotel in the Scranton area. And then this morning we woke up to finish the trip to come home, which is only maybe a 3-hour trip today. But we were on a time crunch nonetheless, and we had to get out of the hotel, we had to pack the car, we had to have breakfast, etc. So I haven't even done anything to make myself presentable, although I probably don't look worse than usual. Anyway, since my last video, I try to stick to facts. I really do. But and when I prefaced my last video, I did indicate that my video would have a combination of facts and hearsay, because I couldn't at that stage differentiate what was fact and what was hearsay. And I still can't, because there has not been a lot of factual information that's been forthcoming. One thing that I said that was hearsay, now I know that it was hearsay at this stage, and I want to apologize for and clear it up, was that I had suggested that the biological father, Seth, may have been accused or in trouble with with the ex regarding some kind of corporal punishment with Sebastian, but apparently that was not true. So I do want to apologize and be fair. Now, for those of you who are new to the case or don't have a whole lot of information, none of us do, but the case centers on Sebastian Rogers, a 15-year-old teenager who lived in Hendersonville, Tennessee, with his biological mother and a stepfather. Their last name is Proudfoot. Seth does have a biological father in his life. In fact, the father seems to be, by all accounts, a very devoted father. Devoted to the extent that I think he moved in tandem when the Proudfoots moved from location to location. He picked up and moved too, so he could be in proximity of wherever Sebastian was living. I took notes, categorizing what is believed to be known at this stage. So I'm just going to read. Around 10 p.m., his biological mother, named Katie, heard noise. I think she says that she said to him, like, "What's all that noise? Cut it out, calm down." And he, according to her, spoke, with a voice, to indicate that he was okay. And she left it at that. Now, a lot of us in 20/20 vision can say, if I heard a crash at 10 o'clock, I'd go running upstairs and see what it was. But, I can give her some slack for that, because I raised 3 kids, and when you hear a noise, the first thought, nowadays maybe it is, but my first thought 15 years ago wasn't like, oh my gosh, somebody's abducting my child. It was like, cut it out, go to sleep. So I cut her some slack on that. Apparently, according to the Proudfoots, the stepfather was not home this evening that this happened. So that was the last thing between Katie and Sebastian. Then around 6 o'clock in the morning, Katie got up to wake Sebastian up for school and make breakfast, and she found him missing. Now, she said that two things were amiss: that he didn't seem to have any shoes. His shoes were all accounted for, so he seems to have left the house without shoes, and it seems as though he had a small flashlight. We've learned that Sebastian is a special needs teenager with autism, and he also has a condition called 6q27 deletion syndrome, which has other complications of its own. As of this moment, unless it happened right before I started this video, there have been no suspects. There's no sign of foul play. No one's been arrested. The young man, if he left on his own, which when I did a reading the last time, and my bias was, I indicated that I had a bias, and my reading kind of verified my bias. So I don't know if that's because, and I really, when I did the reading, I kept in mind that I had a bias, and yet the cards to me screamed what my hunch was. But my hunch in that reading, if you don't want to go back there and check it out, was that he seemed to have been unhappy. It seems as though there were problems in, from outward appearances, it seems as though there were problems in that household. And the court of popular opinion, at the very least, agrees with that feeling. Now, the court of popular opinion believes that the Proudfoots, Katie, and the stepfather, Chris, most certainly had something to do with what happened to Sebastian. And they, most people believe that they killed him and did something with his body or whatever. My hunch when I did the reading, and then through the reading, to me it seemed as though I agreed that Sebastian was probably very unhappy and didn't want to live there anymore. And that maybe he friended somebody, or maybe he was lured by someone who took advantage of an unhappy teen situation with special needs and managed to lure Sebastian out of the household. Now, what happened after that is anyone's guess. I don't know. But that's what my thoughts were, and that's what my reading suggested. But there's a few things, at this stage now. I mean, it's, I guess that reading was done about a week ago. And there's still no information. There's still nothing. The parents lived in a affluent community. They had a home that was, upwards towards $1 million home. So their home, was a large home. And if anything had gone on in that house, or if they killed him in their house, I don't think, common sense kind of tells me that they wouldn't have taken off, because anybody can, the police or FBI or whoever could access that house and surely go over it with a fine-tooth comb and know whether or not anything bad happened inside the house. And it seems like they've basically abandoned the house. They don't seem to be, there anymore. So I think their reasoning has been that they've gotten so many death threats, which is probably no doubt, because, as I mentioned, the court of popular opinion is prosecuting them for sure. So they made a joint decision, or one of them made a decision and the other one is going along with it, to leave that property. But like I said, if they were guilty of doing something at that property, would they really leave the house? Because then anybody could go in and anybody could, make it easy for the law enforcement to go in there and further investigate. Now, I do believe that, law enforcement made a trip there, of course, the morning that it happened and saw nothing amiss. But a deeper thing could go on, very easily now that they're not there. So it's still kind of strange. Most of us don't understand how they could take off when the child is missing. But, in my reading and in my conversation before the reading, I mentioned I do have some experience, as many people do, with autism in the family. Now, I seem like our family has, if there's a genetic predisposition, which I'm convinced there has to be, our family has it in spades, because every other person in our family has it, or to some degree or other, or is on the spectrum. Now, I mention that to remind us of that because having grown up in a household where I had a brother who was severely autistic, and I mean, in those days in the 60s, there wasn't a name for autism. In fact, they just declared my brother MR, the term used for developmentally delayed individuals that is not appropriate nowadays, but that is how they diagnosed my brother. And, at that time, now I know that he was a challenge, he was a handful to raise. So I can imagine, and I'm not justifying any behavior that's, inappropriate, but I can imagine, and my parents were married, my parents were a couple, he was their joint child, and they both loved him very much. And yet his condition was a huge challenge for my parents. They had 3 other children to raise, and this one child, I guess it complicated our lives. We all loved him, but let's not lie. They're not always adorable and sweet and all that. I mean, sometimes their behavior can be exasperating, and when Katie herself may be on the spectrum, or she may have some of these issues herself, because if it's genetic, I don't know if she or Seth carry that gene, but she may not have typical reactions to things, so her behavior might seem atypical, but that might be because she is also an atypical person to some degree. Seth, on the other hand, his biological father, seems very typical in his conversation and how he is handling all of this. I mean, he's out there, boots to the ground, looking for his son. And, he seems by all accounts to be a devoted father. So it's not been said, or discussed where this genetic autism originated from, but I wouldn't be surprised if it originated with Katie, because she too seems to have atypical responses. Now, she's married to Chris, who is not his biological father, and he's been married 5 times. And now I'm not trying to cast shade on him like everyone else is, but come on, I do acknowledge that if you've been married 5 times, chances are good you have some personality issues. And I would think it was probably safe to say their marriage probably had its fair share of challenges as a result of having Sebastian in it. Now, there has been a lot of discussion about the lights, and somebody shared that it was a trash truck at 3 o'clock. And I'm kind of jumping a little bit. There has been video released showing a pair of lights up in a corner, and then 2 individual. I'm using my hands to show where on the screen it appeared, where there was one flashlight that was brighter, and then one that looked like a smaller flashlight with a less bright light, and they all seemed to be in sync with one another. And I don't know who it was that came. I think it was like some kind of authority or the township or somebody said that was a trash truck at 3 a.m. Now, I think they threw trash truck out there as a red herring. When I say they, I mean the officials. They're not saying much about those lights, only initially they came out and said something like, oh, it was a trash truck. But if you think about it, common sense, if you live in an affluent area, the trash trucks are not coming around your house at 3 a.m. in the morning. I'm sorry, because people who are paying a lot of taxes are not going to tolerate a trash truck coming around their neighborhood at 3 a.m. That's not why you're paying high taxes. And furthermore, most people are told by the municipalities to have your garbage cans out by 5 or 6 in the morning, which means they can't come before 5 or 6 in the morning. I think 6 o'clock is the normal time. So if you don't have your trash cans out by 6 a.m. and they come by at 6 a.m., you're out of luck. But if they were going to say, if they, you see what I'm saying? So I still don't believe that those flashing lights in the upper left-hand corner of that video could have been a trash truck. What they were, I don't know. It could have been just a car parked up at the end of the street, had nothing to do with anything. But nothing is being, no one's really looking, no officials seem to be making any kind of public remark about what those light flashes were. Now, the natural parents, Katie and Seth, have been divorced for a number of years, and there seems to be no friendly relationship between them, which could translate, at the very least, to Sebastian being very sad or caught up in the conflict. I think that Sebastian had been with his natural father maybe a week before this happened, or up until like a few days before this happened. So the contrast, or the, having to go back to a household that he maybe didn't feel comfortable in, maybe that was something that was on his mind the evening of whatever happened. As I mentioned, the court of public opinion has Katie and Chris Proudfoot guilty of some wrongdoing. I think, when I did my last video, my reading on this topic, I agree wholeheartedly that they were not ideal parents for a young man with special needs, because I know what it means to have a household with a child with severe disabilities, as I said, my brother and my parents. And it doesn't seem as though they used good judgment in a number of ways. For example, the biological father, Seth, spoke out not too long ago, and he spilled the beans about there having been an S assault on Sebastian under their care. Now, I've heard rumors and innuendos about who that individual might have been. It might have been a family relative, a relative in the family, extended family relative who stayed at their house. Whether or not this individual was known to be an SA, I don't know. But Sebastian had been SA'd in the home of Katie and Chris a while ago, maybe a year, a couple of years. I don't know how long ago that happened. Now, at that point, I don't know if Seth did anything to get sole custody. I don't know if he countersued them or if he took them to court or anything like that. I don't know how he responded. I don't really know if he was having Sebastian for full custody after the summer, or if Sebastian was just going to go to his biological father's house for the summer. So that I don't know. But at any rate, there's no love between Katie and Chris and Seth. They're not working in tandem. They're not showing a joint effort of like, let's put everything aside and let's look for this boy. Nothing like that is happening. And each camp is throwing shade at the other. Excuse me, well, I just want to make sure I touch points that I thought were important. Now, if the Proudfoots wanted to get rid of Sebastian because he was a challenge and because, he was difficult, and maybe if Chris said, I've had enough, I can't deal with this kid anymore. If Seth was having him for the summer, wouldn't that have been light at the end of the tunnel? And it seems as though Seth wanted the boy, unless he's just saying that now, but give the guy the benefit of the doubt. Maybe, it sounds as though he wanted the child full time. So if Sebastian was really such a handful that the stepfather lost all his patience and said, I can't deal with this kid anymore, why wouldn't they have just given him to his father rather than killing the boy, right? I mean, it seems to me they had an out. They could have just said, you know what, Seth, you take them. I've had it up to here. You take them. Right? So they had an out. They didn't, they wouldn't have had to have killed him, which is, I think, what a lot of people think. The authorities haven't ruled anything out publicly, but neither have they shared any clues with us. And so once again, law enforcement, on yet another case, has left the public with a vacuum. And so all these rumors get started, all these innuendos get spread. It's so hard and challenging to know what's the truth and what isn't. And even within this discussion here, some of what I'm saying still could be untruth. I'm just going on the information that I have that's most recent, that sounds most reasonable. At some point, there was, they did employ, search dogs who did find a trail, a scent that ended right at a retention pool. But that pool was drained, and so there was no clues there. So that was a dead end. The police say, that the lights from the truck or whatever that thing was were not evidentiary evidence. But when they're asked what it is, they refuse to say. They say, oh, who knows? We don't know, or they're not just speaking. So, gosh, there's so many. This case is just a case of mystery. For some inexplicable reason, Katie and I guess that, Katie and Chris left the property, I guess because there's been so much negative press about them, and maybe they fear for their lives, and I'll give them that. However, I can understand somebody feeling that way. However, I think, knowing myself as I do, I tend to think that, if God forbid something like that were to have happened while I was raising my children, I don't care what anybody would do to me if they saw me looking for my son or daughter or whatever. I would do it anyway. Because my feeling would be, so what if they kill me? I'm already unhappy. I'm already terribly sad about the loss of this child, right? So there's nothing you could do to me that would be worse than that. But I can't, impose how I feel on them because they're different people. At any rate, I'm going to do some more cards. Just to see if there's any more insight. The young man has left the property. That's a fact. There are no clues. There's no scent. There's no clues above and beyond that he went without shoes and that he took a flashlight. And even that may not be the truth. It's just what is believed to have happened. Had he been unhappy on his own and met somebody online, which is what my reading suggested, who could sense that the child, was unhappy and befriended him and lured him from the house to some nefarious end, which maybe would explain why there are no clues, because all you have to do is pick the kid up at the end of the driveway and there would be no scent beyond that point. And he could be anywhere in the world, right? So that was what I thought happened. I don't think it's possible that he ran away on his own, because at some point, somebody's going to see him wandering on the road. At some point, there's got to be a Ring doorbell somewhere that would show that, or an intersection, camera, something. So it doesn't seem as though he left on his own without having been lured by someone else. As far as maybe his mother and stepfather having something to do with it, that's possible. But it probably didn't happen in the home because there's no evidence of it happening in the home. And from what we've been told, the stepfather was in another state, so he wasn't even around. And innuendo and rumor suggests that the Proudfoots were not getting along very well. So if that were the case, and if Chris believed that Katie might have done something to her son, that would be a perfect opportunity for him to say, oh yeah, she's a crackpot. That would be the easy way to get out of that marriage, you know? So chances are good, if they were not happily married, that this would be Chris's perfect opportunity to say, yeah, blame everything on her. But he doesn't seem to be doing that. I don't know what they're doing. They're saying to one another privately, but it doesn't seem as though that's happening publicly. And I don't even know what laying some cards could do at this point, you know, but maybe we all need to take a step back, take a breath of fresh air, and look at everything with a new set of eyes, which is what I'm trying to do with these cards, because at this point I don't even have a hunch anymore. I'm as clueless as anyone else. So let's lay down a few more cards, not from a soothsayer's or fortune teller's perspective, but just to see what other possibilities might be in play, just to redirect our thinking, because as long as something hasn't been proven, then it's still on the table. So if nothing has been proven about the Proudfoots doing something to Sebastian, then that means that there are infinitely different possibilities that could have happened. So we have to look at all the possibilities. And I'm just hoping that, you know, I'll ask the universe to allow us to glimpse the scenario once again with fresh eyes, and to really look at these cards for all clues, even numeric clues, right? You know, the cards have numbers on them, and they have suits, and they have court cards. We don't always pay attention to the numbers, you know, like but if you wanted to do like a reading on like for the lottery for fun, you know, like a fortune telling read or something, you could pull like 3 cards or 5 cards and just look at those numbers and play those numbers. So it's possible that we can even look at the cards for their numeric values. So keep that in mind. Some of you who live locally, I wouldn't know street names or anything like that. I wouldn't know highway or route roads, right? But you might. So if you're from that area and you see some cards and they have, if you see a sequence of cards with numeric value that correspond to roads or something like that, you know, that might be a clue as well. Alrighty then, I'm just going to shuffle a few more times. I do not read reversals, so I upright any card. So we have the Wheel of Fortune. First card, 2 cups. Temperance. So we have 2 cups, 2 cards rather, suggesting water. I think if I'm not mistaken, the Temperance card came up before, which is interesting. And I'm not sure about the 2 of Cups, but that also may have come up. Isn't that something? Okay, we have 4 coins, which is a happy card. I typically identify this card as a happy card, a stable card, you know, domestic happiness, you know. So let's see, you know, if the next, well, there are water cards up here too. So, but, you know, water and coins, they support one another, so they're not contraindicated. If we see a couple batons surrounding this, no, it would be, excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm rambling on. It's been a long day. If we see swords that surround this card, then I might think, you know, it might be suggested that there's bringing out the unhappy aspect of this card. But we have the wish fulfillment card. No, 9 of Cups, which is another card of water, We have 5 batons. Okay, so we're not surrounding that card with, we have the World card. Dang. So we have the World card and the Wish Fulfillment card, which kind of suggests the best possible outcome, which is counterintuitive to what I and everyone else is thinking. So we have the 7 of coins. And then we have the Chariot, which also showed up in my other reading. I do believe it did. I should have checked before I started this reading, but I want to do fresh readings, so I'm just going on memory. Wow. So we have a lot of optimistic cards here, which is counterintuitive to what's been going on. We have 2 of Cups, which is that partnership, which by all accounts seems happy. Now the Wheel of Fortune, can suggest destiny. It could be a change of luck. Maybe we'll be getting a break. Maybe there will be a change of luck. Now, maybe the luck isn't like he's found alive, but maybe a change of luck whereby we're finding some clues now or something like that. Because the Wheel of Fortune, to be the first card in the spread, suggests there's a change of luck. So it could be that information will be forthcoming, which might explain my urgency this morning that I had to get up and do a reading, but I just was not able to because we had to get on the road. We have the 2 of Cups, which is partnership, togetherness. We have Temperance, which could suggest more water, and we do have another water card. But it could also just changing something from one thing to another, or something not being what it looked to be. And you know what? I think some of these same cards were in the reading that I did formally. I think those 2 were, and I think this was. Then we have a stable domestic card, which by all accounts is not what that household was. That household was not a stable household, followed by the Wish Fulfillment card. And then, we do have, we have batons with water. So they are at odds with one another. But there's only one of them. And this amount, 9, is above and beyond the 5 of batons. So there would still be more positive than negative with these 2, even with these 2 at odds with one another. Now, whose wish is it? Whose wish was fulfilled? Somebody's wish has been fulfilled for a best possible outcome, if you were to do a reading, for example, am I going to get a job? If I applied for this job and it's the best job, it's a job of a lifetime, or it's a chance of a lifetime, and I were to do a reading and the 9 of Cups and the World card popped up with the Wheel of Fortune showing a change of luck, perhaps, I would say, yeah, it really looks good. I mean, it looks like you have all your ducks in order, and, go with the flow, because it looks as though you have every reason to believe that it could work out in your behalf, right? So that's what makes this reading so perplexing, because it seems very unlikely that we'd have the best possible outcome after 40-some days of this young man being missing. And yet that's what we want, unless the best possible outcome at this stage is finding clues or finding evidence so that, a conclusion could be drawn, which is a possible way of interpreting these cards, the optimistic aspect of these cards. Then we have 2 7s next to one another. We have the Chariot, and we have the 7 of Coins, which again is a domestic card, a card of transition, a card of moving forward, as is the Chariot. So it almost looks like if the question was, will Sebastian be able to live with his dad? If that were the question, these 2 cards would indicate, all of these cards would indicate wish fulfillment. Yes, Seth will get his wish. The young man will get his wish. There's a change of fortune, a change of the way, the happiness of the heart, a change occurring. If we look at Temperance in that way, happy domestic, the wish fulfillment. Okay, this would be the only challenging one. Perhaps there would be some struggle or some issues with the natural mother, maybe, or but again, the Cups card, the Nine of Cups, has more than almost exponentially more than the grief in the Five of Batons. Then we have the World card, and then we have domestic transition and moving forward. Wow. So I'm more perplexed than I was before. I think that I will do the quintessential cards. So bear with me as I go off camera to pull those cards. Okay, so here I've got all the quint cards, and I'm not going to get into how I did all that. If you want to know how I do all that, you can probably watch any of my other videos. I'm just not going to get into it right now. Okay, so the quint card for the entire spread is the Magician, which in my understanding of this card can suggest sleight of hand, some kind of trick, some kind of confusion, red herrings, right? Or some kind of trick. Now it's funny because, whenever it seems as though whenever I do readings on what happened to somebody where there is foul play involved, the Magician card frequently pops up because somebody did something to trick them. Another card that popped up in the last reading I did for Sebastian was the Moon card, which at that point was for the overall read, which made me believe that if you really want to get to the root of it, you have to look and concentrate efforts on what is factually known about that evening, because what is factually known about that evening will lead the way to what happened to the young man. But now that doesn't seem to be the focus. The focus now seems to be on, the primary focus would be some kind of trick or sleight of hand, or perhaps a lie, something not being what we thought it was originally. And when that card appeared in my other reading, I thought it was that Sebastian had an understanding of what something was, but that it became something different that he didn't expect. Now for this row, we have the Emperor as the quintessential card, which would, the Emperor obviously is a male authority who oversees what's going on. So there is an adult male who figures prominently in at least the message of that top row, which shows a change of luck, partnership, water, or something changing from one thing to another. And also look at this here. We have 2 cups, possibly something, a vessel that holds water. And here we have 2 cups exchanging. So I don't think we should overlook this clue. The 2 cups being echoed here as well. But the context is harder. If we look at this row, we have a happy partnership. We have a wish fulfillment card. And then we have 7 of coins, which shows a change, as I mentioned, or a transition in domestic life, like something changing about domestic life, right? Maybe Sebastian thought he was going to be moving and living with his dad. Maybe that's, if these cards suggest, okay, we can look at it from a couple points of view. If Sebastian decided that he'd had enough, because his biological father, Seth, said the only reason that Sebastian would leave his house without shoes and socks on would be because something became unbearable. And he might have just reached the point where he felt like he just couldn't live with his parents anymore, his stepfather and his mother anymore. And maybe in his mind, when he did this act, if he left the house, it might have been because he thought it would result in him being able to move and live with his father. He was most optimistic if we look at it from that perspective. If this is Sebastian's perspective on that evening, then maybe he felt that by doing this, by leaving the property, maybe he thought he would end up with his dad. Who knows? If somebody lured him through the internet, through, let's say, gameplay, right? They might have convinced him that that was his dad. I mean, I know that's, a little out there. But, if somebody has wickedness on their mind, they could be very clever, and they could have told him anything. So maybe he thought that this person would take him to his father. Now, interestingly, the death card showed up in the last reading I did for Sebastian, but I think it was in this position. But now we see it's in the last position. Whereas before I saw this card as a most up, not the worst possible scenario, because I saw it, I think these two cards, actually, I think the death card and the temperance card were side by side, I think, which made me think that at that stage, Sebastian became aware that what he thought was going on, like maybe he thought he was with a friend, but that idea ended quickly. And then this card supported that because we have the idea of something changing from one thing to another. But here we have it at the end of the read, which is all the more tragic, I think, because at the very least, it suggests that time is of the essence, because this card has traveled now. And obviously, after 40 some days, time is of the essence, and it has been of the essence, because anything. But these cards are so optimistic. So I'm hanging on to some optimistic hope, that the optimism of this spread is not just that they find out what happened to bring a conclusion, but that it's the best possible outcome for this young man. The only card that disturbs me at the end of any line is this one, which just makes me feel that it's very, very urgent, more urgent than it had been prior. Anyway, I didn't identify the deck I was using. This was the same deck I took with us when we went to Niagara Falls. So that's how I came home. I grabbed the deck. I came into my tarot parlor to do the reading. I didn't even pick any other decks. This is the same deck I used while we were, on vacation. It's the Golden Tarot of Marseille, put out by Scarabeo. And it's based loosely on the Claude Burdel of 1751, a Swiss tarot deck. And no, the original cards would never have had gold leaf on them. So this is an anomaly. It's like it's based on the actual deck, but they put some gold leaf to give it a little bling, and I love it for that reason. So anyway, friends, thank you for tuning in. If you hadn't seen my first reading, perhaps go back and check it out and see if I'm not mistaken about several of these cards being shared with that last reading. And this is a different deck, so it's not like cards stick together and they show up in sequence or anything. It was a completely different deck I used for that reading. Until next time, friends, peace, stay well, be kind, do no harm, and please, please, please pray for this young man, and especially for his father, who I think will be destroyed if the outcome isn't optimal. And I'm sure his mother would, not feel, I think she would share in his grief as well. She may have strange ways of presenting herself, but let's give her the benefit of the doubt to believe that despite her peculiarities, she's still his mother and she still has feeling. Until next time, friends, peace. Oh, I already did all that. Bye-bye.